Hello, welcome to our discussion on social ecology. Today, we're going to talk about levels of social ecology, messages that can affect culture and climates within organizations, and decentralized groups and how to create them. So, what is social ecology? This is basically the study of people and their relationships to their environment. And more specifically, the study of people and their relationships to their, at least for our focus, their relationships to their environment in terms of cultures they tend to associate with, groups they tend to associate with. And that's kind of what we're going to be going over today is the typical person, what are the groups, what are the cultures that they tend to be involved in. And we're going to go over all of the following levels that you see here. So interpersonal and individualistic level, that's just sort of like what's going on in your head. And then obviously like interacting with other people. We're going to talk about so individual, interpersonal dynamics, organization. So that's typically like jobs or organizations that we voluntarily choose to be a member of. And then the broader culture, cultural groups at large. So, first of all, we're going to start out at the largest area, which is the cultural group at large. Okay. Now, these are basically you remember if you look at our prior videos where I talked about how you have dominant and then you have co-cultures, right? And dominant cultures, those were the big groups. Those were things like nationality, race. They could be religion, right? Things like that. And the co-cultures or subcultures are smaller things that you belong to. That could be maybe be your family unit, although the family unit, of course, can also be influenced by the culture at large. So it's almost like a combination of a dominant and co-culture going on there. But it could be things like I mentioned, musical interest, right? Or you're a fan of a particular sports team, right? As these like smaller co-cultures. So in terms of the broader dominant cultures, I have some images here on the screen. So we're just going to talk about if we're going to use like American society as an example of the dominant culture. So let's look at like nationality, right? Or citizenship in this case as being a member of America, right? A U.S. citizen. What are some of the themes that prevail that group, that cultural group that we're all associated with if we're are U.S. citizens, right? Or people living here. So a couple of things, right? So obviously you have this notion of capitalism and consumerism, okay? So we're kind of socialized by the broader culture at large that you should spend. That spending is a viable way to happiness, right? It's sort of like how people are kind of sold on the dream of, to be happy, you need to have the high paying job, the house, right? Not the apartment. You need to own a car, right? You have to have the right clothing, right? The right look, right? You have to show a sense of wealth and abundance, right? In terms of what you've obtained. And this is sort of like the phrase keeping up with the Joneses, right? I want to make sure that financially I'm showing that I'm successful, right? And so we're kind of sold on that that's what you do. Or even, if you're watching this video as part of one of my courses, you're in college, right? So what are we sold? That part of the way that you achieve sort of your dream life. It doesn't have to be the American dream, but what I'm essentially saying is the dream Americans are sold, right? Which is that you go to college, you get the degree, which allows you to make more money or have the job you want. Now, it doesn't mean that any of those messages, that the dominant culture of like consumerism and capitalism, it doesn't mean they're wrong. Okay, so for example, can material wealth make you happy? Right? Can you be happier if you drive a nicer car? Yeah, that's very possible, right? Would you be happier if you owned a house or rented an apartment? Probably be happier if you owned a house. I think that's fair, right? Like it's okay to admit that, right? Take the college situation. If your dream job is to be a nurse, and that would really make you happy. You want to work with people, you want to work in healthcare, right? And you go to college and you get that degree, you become a nurse, you go out and you're happy, right? Like that wasn't false hope you were being sold. That actually was the path to the dream, right? Like it actually was true that job would make you happy. You need a degree to get there, right? So it doesn't mean these are false narratives, but it's more or less whether or not they're narratives you want to chase or pursue, that's another question. But I'm just telling you those narratives exist, right? That we're kind of told that, really, if you're going to be happy, you need to have these certain success indicators. And a lot of times these success indicators are tied into consumerism, right? Like spend money, obtain things, material wealth and possessions will make you happy. And the reason I sort of brought up college in relation to that is because, is it expensive to go to college? Yeah, right? Like to get a college degree isn't just about intelligence or opportunity. Well, it's not just about intelligence, right? You also have to have opportunity, and more specifically, like opportunity in terms of finances, right? And if you go get that degree, and for most of us, right, if you didn't have a free ride, that's going to cost you a lot of money that you're going to then be paying back for years and years, right? Which then makes you sort of keep working, right, in the machine to keep making more and more money because you got to pay back those loans, right? Or the cost of college. So it's just sort of, again, what I'm basically trying, I'm not, whether or not these narratives are good or bad is another separate issue, like a moral evaluation. It's just pointing out these narratives exist in our culture, right? And by the way, capitalism more specifically, it's this notion of if you work hard, right, you will get the results that you deserve, right? So you work hard in school, you'll get the grades, you'll get the job, you'll be successful, right? If you start a business or you go out in the work world and you work hard, you'll be able to obtain the finances to live the life you want, right? And again, whether or not that's true or not, that's a separate sort of discussion, but that's certainly what we're sold on, right? And we're sold on this notion that like capitalism rewards the people that work harder and the people that are smarter, right? And the people that don't, they get a different, they don't get the reward. Now, again, are there holes in that narrative? Maybe, right? I think certainly the capitalism part of it, you can argue there's some holes in the narrative, right? That maybe that's not totally accurate or totally true, or certainly some of us are starting out, right, in more difficult positions than others. I guess maybe that's the fairest critique of it in terms of like question if that's true or not. But anyway, these are themes we're kind of sold on in the broader American culture at large. And obviously, that is not the case in other cultures, right? So, for example, some other cultures don't, and you might even be members of these groups as well, that like they don't necessarily promote consumerism as much, right? Or literally are not capitalistic, right? They have other economic systems. So that's an example of some of these. I have the social media stuff up here. You see those images just to kind of remind you of this notion between collectivist versus individualistic cultures, right? Where I talked about how collectivist cultures have a focus, right? A mindset, and in terms of how they communicate on, let's do what's best for the group. Okay. But American culture, kind of social, at least modern American culture, it's very much do what's best for me, right? And again, you see that through social media. Look at all social media. It's all about drawing attention to me, 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 me. And it really does not matter what the societal impact is, right? Obviously, you can see that on the really nefarious end when it comes to like cyberbullying and just people being awful online and that kind of stuff. But, or like just, posting awful, hateful kind of things. But on the other end, you even see it though. You can see it just in the sense of people posting when it's like, look at me living my best life, so to speak, almost in a bragging kind of way, right? Or in a way of like trying to get people to be envious. I think I'd mentioned in the last video, it's certainly something I say a lot, which is that social media now tends to be everybody's personal PR firm, where I'm going to show everybody the best version of myself and the version I'm trying to curate, right? The image of me I want you to have. And what is that about? Is that necessarily about honesty or your happiness or the message you should be putting out there? Or is it about you looking the way you want to look, right? It's probably about the latter, right? Which means it's about you. So these are some of the things in our culture that we promote to give you an idea of like the broader sense of American culture. And obviously there's other things like democracy, and there's some religious undertones in American culture and things like that. And from an ethnicity standpoint, it's certainly definitely still a melting pot. In fact, it's getting more diverse if you look at demographics and census information. So these are just some examples of some of these broader themes that, again, can be good and bad. Some of it kind of depends on how you view them, right? And whether or not they're working for you, but they're certainly put out there in the broader culture. And last one thing I did want to note on this is there's conflict sometimes. So I mentioned American culture tends to be very individualistic. It doesn't mean there's not collectivist elements. So what are collectivist elements in our culture, in American culture, right? An example would be the family unit, right? Whenever somebody does something because they're like, well, this is what's best for my family, right? You are making a collectivist decision. You're saying, I'm going to do what's best for the whole. It may or may not be what's best for me, but that doesn't really matter. That's not paramount, right? What matters is what's best for the whole. So we certainly have some conflicts, right? It's not necessarily one size fits all in terms of collectivist versus individualistic, and even within some of these themes. But this gives you an example of some of these broader themes, right? If we're going to look at American culture as an example of like some of the big dominant groups that we tend to belong to. So people obviously tend to belong to these dominant cultures. Sorry, skipped ahead there. Now let's look at more of a co-culture, right? Because not everybody belongs to the same organizations. And so organizations, we're going to focus primarily on workplace scenarios, but these are groups we belong to. So obviously these are typically chosen. These are jobs. This is the college. This is that you may go to. This is the church you might be a member of, or just organizations you choose, right, to actively be engaged with. And they can have their own little culture. And we've all probably heard the catchphrase of organizational culture and company culture and all that sort of stuff. And we're going to kind of talk about like, is that a buzzword that we just see on motivational posters, or does it mean anything? Does it really matter, right? So let's kind of talk about that. But we all tend to be involved in organizations. And again, these are co-cultures. They're not dominant because obviously not everybody's a member of the same organization. In fact, if you think about it, very few people are a member of the same organization, right, in the grand scheme of things. So, look, this gets talked about a lot. It gets satire. There's a lot of satire on it. If we just look at movies and things like that, this would be things like Office Space. This is a movie from the late '90s. If you haven't seen it, it's a good example of sort of the common doldrums and crappiness, so to speak, of working in an office environment. And obviously, in more recent times, it's like series like The Office with Steve Carell, kind of like, make fun of this and not just making fun of kind of the daily life in an office, right? And how crappy that can be if you're unhappy there, but also some of the attempts to build culture, right? And some of the sort of corny or overplayed tactics that people use to make people all buddies at the workplace or enjoy their job. So, look, this gets talked about a lot. There's a lot of satire about it. Again, sometimes it's used as buzzwords where you see it on the motivational poster. They're like, we're a team, right? And it's just this image of people, I don't know, together on the soccer field with the sun setting. I don't know, right? And so we just kind of pass it off. So the first question I'm going to have for you here is like, okay, does it really matter? Does it actually really matter in terms of research? It turns out it does. Okay, it's not just a buzzword. There's a reason to care about it, so we're going to talk about why to care about it. Now, first of all, one of the big reasons to care about it, right? Whether or not there was research to support that it matters or not, which we're going to get into, but here's a reason to care about it. As I mentioned in one of the prior videos, if you think about it, when you're going out and you're trying to find your dream job, whatever that job may be, right? That job can offer you three things. Right? There's three things a job can really give you. So I mentioned this before, right? It's financial compensation and benefits. So it's the money, it's the time off, it's the healthcare, it's that kind of stuff, right? What are you giving me? The second one is I enjoy it. This could be because I'm saving the whales, right? I'm bringing back the dire wolf, right? Or it's just fun. It's just really awesome. Okay, and I enjoy it for that reason. So it's rewarding in some level, right? What's the third thing? Company culture. I like the people I work with. Okay. Now again, if you take a job and it gives you one of these, typically they'll have a reason to stay, right? Like we all know people that are, and you may have already experienced this, where you get into a job and you can take or leave the people you work with, and it's okay. And it's not really rewarding. You might find it mundane, but it pays the bills. It pays the money you need, right? Or there's jobs that you really like, it's fun or it's rewarding, and you stay even though it's not really paying what you need it to, right? Or the job that maybe it's not paying what you want, it's not necessarily rewarding, but you really like your coworkers, like you're best friends with people at work kind of thing, right? And that's where a lot of people find themselves in terms of the work world. They're in these jobs with one of these, or maybe if they're really lucky, it's got two. Well, what I'm suggesting to you is one of the reasons company culture just kind of matters, research or not, is look at this just from your own life, right? In terms of, hey, this matters to me. I don't, whether or not it's supported at a broader scale or not. And I'm suggesting it should matter to you, and here's why. If you think about it, if you have all three, if you find a job that gives you all three of these, isn't that the dream job? Isn't that the pinnacle point? Like the happiest you could be at work? Think about it. That's a job that pays me what I want, gives me what I want, right, in terms of the benefits. I enjoy it. It's awesome, right? Or it's really awesome that I'm doing something good for the world. And I love the people I work with. Like, are you ever leaving that job? That sounds like the perfect job, right? So the reason I'm saying pay attention to company culture is because that should be on your checklist of this is what I want, man. This is what I'm looking for in life. I want all three. You get all three, you're going to love going to work, right? So it kind of matters just in the interpersonal sense. So, okay. Now, obviously, this is intercultural. We're talking about this in the context of intercultural communication. So we're going to get mostly into, okay, why culture matters. But let's kind of dispose of the diversity issue, right? Does diversity matter? And same thing, it's like a buzzword, we value all perspectives. And again, it's a team of different people. It's kind of like you pull up a college website, right? Any college website, and you're gonna have the stock photos. There's like the cool campus building. Like if they got a clock tower, it's there. Fall leaves falling, right? They'll take that shot of fall semester, so the campus just looks packed, and they're gonna show you the nice classroom and the library shot, and the teacher, right, instructing effectively, right? And you're going to see the stock image of the students, right? And it's always like 8 students, it's like 5 students, right? And they're walking together with coffee, they're laughing, somebody told a joke, right? And if I said, like, look at the picture, who's there? And you're going to see this, like, really big, diverse range of students, right? You're going to have, like, age range of, like, 18 to 60, right? They're going to be every ethnicity, and they're going to look like they come from very diverse backgrounds, right? And you might look at that as, again, and underneath it says, we value you, whoever you are, right? And you look at that and you go, well, here's a PC, diversity photo, right? And people kind of pass it off, right? So the question is just like company culture, is it just a buzz thing? Does it matter? Does diversity matter in the workplace? Well, the research shows it does matter. It's not just a buzzword. By the way, just to kind of wrap the college picture thing, the reason colleges do that, by the way, is because this kind of deals with like psychology and identity and all this sorts of stuff. We don't need to go all into that, but basically, long story short, is they're hoping that whoever you are, if you're a prospective student, you will look in that image and see somebody like you. And you'll say to yourself, they went there, it worked out for them, it can work out for me too, right? That's what they're hoping. Because when people see models of other people like themselves in the world doing something, it makes them think they could do it too, right? So that's what they're going for, by the way, in that image. But what does the research say on diversity? Well, it turns out it really does matter. So these are studies about decision making and whether or not companies and groups and organizations regret a decision after the fact, right? So they make a decision. There were obviously consequences of that decision. Do they think they made the right decision, right? So here's what studies kind of show. About if you have an all-male team, and we're going to actually talk about ethnic and gender diversity, right? This is in terms of this research. So if you have an all-male team, about 58% of the time, if you move out 12 months, 24 months, you will say made the right decision. We still feel good about the decision, right? By the way, the average is about 66. So usually people get things right about 2/3 of the time in the decision they make. So an all-male team is actually already batting below the average. Okay, you're already not statistically. We're going to come back to why this happens, but let me just tell you the results first. Now let's add gender diversity. So now you have men and women, right, on this making the decision, so to speak. All of a sudden, it improves 25% your decision making. So now 73% of the time they'll say, yep, made the right call on that, right? Whether it's product innovation or customer service or whatever we're trying to do, right? Now let's add age diversity. Right? So now we're going to listen to everybody's opinion, right? So let's just add, so in terms of age, we're not going to just ignore somebody because they're too young, they're too old, right? and we're gonna try to have age diversity in this panel. You do that, now the correct decision is typically made 80% of the time, right? Now, if we add age, gender, and now geographics, they're just from different parts of the world. So now we're getting into like nationality, ethnicity, that kind of stuff. Now it goes up to 80% of the time. So we're talking about improving decisions overall from 58% success rate to 87% saying, yeah, we made the right decision, again, 24 months out. Okay. So that right there tells you diversity matters, right? Like, and we see this is just one of many studies that kind of bear out similar numbers. Now, the issue would be like, so why does this happen? Well, it's not rocket science. I mean, this is just kind of common sense. Like that, sometimes, learning's remembering. It's intuitive. We just never really thought about it. And this is the kind of thing where I think once I explain it here, you'll be like, yeah, that actually makes sense. We just don't really think about it. So here's what happens. In any situation, when you have a problem and you're trying to solve that problem, and if you are getting input from people with different backgrounds and different experiences, they're going to try to solve the problem in different ways. And when they offer different solutions that you can pick from, right, and you're getting different perspectives, also, they tend to have different resources to help solve the problem because of their background, right, that they can target and help provide an example, right? Let's say, for example, you were trying to reach a certain demographic. Like, I'm trying to reach 20-year-olds, and I'm in a room with a bunch of 45-year-olds, right? And another 20-year-old, if they're on my team, so I have age diversity, they're going to probably be more likely to get an accurate reading on this is what 20-year-olds are thinking, and this is how they're going to respond to this message or whatever my product or service is, right? Because they're there, right? They have that perspective. So look, when you have people from different backgrounds, when you have diversity, when you're trying to make a decision, diversity of perspective, you get diversity of resources, where they're coming from, right? Skill sets, they come up with more solutions, varied solutions, and oftentimes better solutions because of their background might be more related to what your problem you're trying to solve. And so look, even if the solutions aren't better, just having more choices, more perspectives gives you a better chance of picking the right one, right? So it's just a matter of just having more options, right? And sometimes better options because people are trying to solve the problem in different ways. It's not rocket science. That's why diversity matters. That's why you kind of want to listen to people from different backgrounds, different perspectives, right? And so this is why that matters. So no, it's not just a PC thing. It's a real thing. Research kind of bears this out. And this is everything from making the right decision. It's everything from how to handle a problem to how do we move forward, how do we innovate, right? Products and services in a lot of different business contexts. This is why this matters. All right, so we're going to kind of focus mostly on company culture today. We're going to get into this in part 2 of this video. So tune in for that, and we'll talk about company culture.